Ed Cooley said what about Brad Underwood?
You are Locked On Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Illini. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Simple reminder, you can find us on your favorite audio platform. You can find us on YouTube, on all the social medias. Do a quick search for Locked On Illini. And on the social medias, just know if you want to send me feedback, whether it's constructive or whether it's negative, whatever it may be, I welcome it, and it'll be me responding. I'm the one that controls those accounts and responds from those accounts. Today's episode is going to be an interesting one. I'm going to be responding to Ed Cooley's comments over the weekend in regards to Illinois and Brad Underwood. We also have Big Ten Ted. I know it's a little early. It's technically Monday, but tonight, Illinois has a basketball game, and so I'll be doing a post-game show for that. So if that's the type of thing you're interested in, and then my subscribers already know this, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe button, and the notification button. That's right. Today, you're going to get 2 episodes. This one that you're watching right now, and I'm going to go live immediately after the Illini and Arkansas Little Rock basketball game tonight. Now, as most of you guys know, Saturday was a busy day for Illini fans as we got to celebrate a 38-31 victory over Rutgers. And by the way, some of you joined me for the live. The live I actually started with about 12 seconds left, and when Illinois was about to kick that field goal, and you saw my live reaction to Pat Bryant's 40-yard touchdown at the end of the game to ice the victory for the Illini. So if you haven't watched it yet, at least watch the first 2 minutes of that episode. I think you'll find it quite entertaining. But right after the football game victory, the Illini men's basketball team had a game against Maryland East Shore. And quite honestly, it was a very dominant Illinois victory, 87-40. Not much to really talk about. I didn't really feel the need to give a recap of it. I'll do it now very quickly. Trey White with 6 points and 11 rebounds in 21 minutes, which is nice to see. I kind of wanted to see a bounce back game from him because I know the talk about Will Riley starting to heat up, and deservedly so. Will Riley, in 19 minutes on Saturday, had 19 points, 7 of 11 in 19 minutes, scoring 19 points. Kasper Shonis, 9, 7, and 4 in 26, and Kylan Basel with 13, 4, and 2 in 25 minutes, and Morez Johnson, who I will say again was put on this earth for one thing, and that's to rebound the basketball, had a double-double with 10 points and 13 rebounds. Again, not really a game that's worth talking about. It's Illinois took care of business against a team that it absolutely should take care of business on. The drama comes more so in the post-game report. When Brad Underwood was asked by a reporter about Ed Cooley's comments earlier in the day about Illinois and Brad Underwood. Now, granted, let me read the quote first. So, Ed Cooley, after they narrowly escaped victory against, a team they were favored by double digits, but they only won by, I believe, 6 points. Someone asked Ed Cooley a question about Jayden Epps. Jayden Epps, of course, famous for his freshman year at Illinois, ultimately decided to transfer out to Georgetown and Ed Cooley. So Ed Cooley had this to say. It's almost like he's a new player. It's something I saw in him his freshman year when he played for that other BS school, end quote. And then he followed that up with saying something along the lines of, I know that's going to make national news. Now, if you're going to follow up a comment like that, and then you follow it up with, I know it's going to make national news, that tells me that this was premeditated. He knows, or at least he's had this thought in his mind for a while, and that he knew that at some point, when he wanted to talk about Jayden Epps, that he was going to let this one slip. Now, what's the reason? Okay, look, technically he's referring to Illinois, right? And that's the only other school that Jayden Epps played in his freshman season. But in actuality, I don't know if this is anything against Illinois. This is obviously a shot at Brad Underwood. Jayden Epps couldn't hang here in Champaign. I'm not going to be negative about him because I feel like he's a kid. He's a freshman. You know what? We know, those of you who are my everydayers know I'm a big Brad Underwood guy. I love the coaching staff that we have in place here. I think Brad Underwood understands what the staff needs to look like, what it needs to do to elevate this program to the point where we're going to be competing for national championships. But in that same breath, I also know that Brad Underwood is not for everybody. There's a certain type of person that probably is just not a good fit for Brad Underwood. I have no ill wills towards Jaden Epps. I will tell you that in his recruitment, when we got him, when I started watching his high school film, I thought he was going to go down as an Illini great. I really thought he exemplified the bulldog type of mentality that Brad Underwood seemingly is always preaching for. And quite honestly, Jaden had a pretty decent freshman year. He started, I believe, 11 of 31 games, averaged 9.5 points, shot 41% from the field, 30% from three-point range. When you're able to make 10 points a game as a freshman in the Big Ten, that tells me that you have a very talented scorer wearing your jersey. And that's what he is, and that's what he continues to be. Obviously, Brad Underwood had some issues with Jaden Epps' inability or lack of wanting to play on the defensive side of the floor. And let's be honest, and I don't think I'm being out of line when I say this, Jaden Epps certainly did not pass the body language test whether it comes to that game against Northwestern, and I know all of you know what I'm talking about. He just seemed to, at some point during the season, kind of mentally check out. And, you know, he got what he wanted. The following year, he transferred to Georgetown to Ed Cooley, who he previously had committed to at Providence. And it was Illinois who had kind of come in and swooped him from Ed Cooley the first time. But, you know, he goes to Georgetown. He starts 28 of 29 games. He averages 18.5 points a game as a sophomore, shooting 39%. Again, 30% from three-point land. You know, not great shooting percentage. 18 points on 15.5 shots a game. More of a volume shooter. I think that's kind of safe to say. Georgetown didn't exactly have the best season last year. And again, that's me being kind of nice about this. In the Big East, they finished 9-23. But Jaden Epps got what he wanted. He got to be the sole focal point of an offense, and he got his numbers, which seemingly, you know, is what he was looking for. Now, when you build around a 6'2", 190-pound guard who likes to shoot volume scoring and doesn't really contribute much on the defensive end, you know, there might be a limit to how good your team's going to play. And so I think we may have seen that last year with Georgetown, ending up with only 9 wins. I don't think there's any Illinois fans at this point who are upset that Jaden Epps left. We were at the time. I certainly was. But in many ways, and this has happened a lot with this program, Illinois upgraded because that's what this coaching staff does. And that's why a lot of people couldn't wait to hear what Brad Underwood would have to say at this postgame report after someone brought up Ed Cooley's comments to him. Nobody would have blamed Brad if he decided to go off on Ed Cooley. There's plenty of things to go off on. Need I remind you, Ed Cooley is not liked by any of the other coaches in the Big East Conference, a conference which he's been coaching for I believe, 14 years. Excuse my quick math. He was at Providence for, I believe, 12 years. And he essentially, if you read into his story, he turned his back on that program, which he had coached for so long, begged for this Georgetown job, eventually got it. And now I don't know if the Georgetown side is particularly happy with the hire. Brad Underwood would be in his right to respond in a certain way, and collectively, the college basketball world would have supported him. And how did Brad Underwood respond? Brad simply said, "That's not even worth wasting my time on." I don't know what he's referencing there. I know Jaden Epps had a productive freshman year here. I'm sure our fans are having fun with that one. And then he went on and talked about how he needs to focus on the opponents immediately ahead. Brad chose the classy route. He chose the correct route. I just read off Jaden Epps' numbers as a freshman. He did have a productive year here as a freshman. What that does to me is it speaks to the content and the character of a guy in charge of a program. Brad has been doing this for a very, very long time. And sure, there has been some fits in the past that simply just didn't work out. But at the same time, you have players like Trent Frazier, like Ayodesumu. You have guys like Terrence Shannon Jr., Coleman Hawkins, who are constantly talking about Brad as a coach and as a mentor and as a father figure and a guy that they owe so much of their career and development. Brad's focused on the future. Brad has nothing to feel sorry about. Ed Cooley calling out Brad Underwood shows an insane amount of insecurity to me. And I want to go longer on this, but after thinking about it, if Brad doesn't think it's too much worthy of commenting, neither should I. Now, I want to sit here and say, you know what? I can't wait for that inevitable Illinois against Georgetown matchup in the round 1, round 2 of the NCAA tournament, because you know the committee eats this stuff up. They love making these storylines happen and flesh out on the court. But let's be honest. I'm very confident Illinois is going to do their part, and they're going to make it there. But Georgetown only won 9 games last year. Georgetown's got a lot of work to do before they even think about sniffing the NCAA tournaments. And quite honestly, now seeing what I see from Ed Cooley, I don't know if I'm going to root for that.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Okay, so I know it's Monday, but as I said earlier, this evening, Illinois men's basketball will be having a basketball game, and I'll be doing a double shift today. And so I decided to bring in my friend Ted from the Big Ten Ted YouTube channel a little early. Ted, thanks for being flexible with your schedule.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to be here on a short week. Of course, we've got the holiday, Thanksgiving on Thursday, the best holiday of the year. I will take no other answer. You get football, you got no presents, you've got food. What else could you ask for? And then, of course, you got leftovers, which we're going to be talking about here in a little bit with Black Friday. Usually I'm sitting down there watching Nebraska and Iowa on Friday, you know, that Big Ten Network slot, CBS last year. But now we've got a double dip. I got to have portion control a little bit on these leftovers, so I got something for the lunch, right? Earlier in the day, I think Minnesota and Wisconsin plays first, and then you got to have some stuff for the nightcap as well, Nebraska and Iowa. So I'm really excited about this weekend, rivalry weekend of football.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of my favorite weekends of the sports calendar, essentially, just because even when at that point, you know, most of the team seasons might be over. It doesn't really matter. Rivalry week is rivalry week. And, you know, so, but we'll get to that in the next segment. Ted, I got to ask you, you know, I said last week that I had a feeling that Illinois Rutgers could be an entertaining football game, but I didn't imagine this happening. Were you able to catch any of that game?
Oh, yeah, I caught it. I certainly had eyeballs on it on the fourth quarter. That's when things really started to ramp up because I had that game side by side with Ohio State, Indiana. At that point, that game, the Buckeyes and Hoosiers was a little bit out of control. So my eyeballs were shifting over to this, and I'm like, they are going up and down the field. Illinois scoring 23 fourth quarter points. Rutgers scoring 14, an absolute offensive explosion there in the fourth quarter. And then we got to talk about the ending. How about Pat Bryant coming up big once again, 7 catches, 197 yards. and a touchdown. He is working his way up this all-conference ladder potentially to see what type of award, whether it's second team win, possibly a first team award when all is said and done. I mean, he has been a fantastic option for Illinois this season. We talked preseason, hey, maybe he's going to be that really good number 2 aside from Zachary Franklin, but Pat Bryant, no doubt, has been the number 1, and Luke Altmaier just coming up big. And this is now an 8-win season. That's 2 8-win seasons in 3 years for Illinois. Now, I'm sure you know, right? And, of course, your audience knows what Illinois was like before Brett Bielema, right? A lot of people now have kind of just slid Illinois into that maybe 6 to 8 win range. Because remember, year 1 was that 5-7 type of season for Brett, and then he's just had a lot of success, right, at Illinois. He just knows how to do one thing and coach Big Ten football. Right? He's built a great football culture over there. They don't beat themselves, and this was another example, another goose egg in the interception column for Luke Altmaier this season. You can tell maybe since the injury of Caden Fagan, they've got a little bit of a committee as far as the running game goes. They ran for 182. Altmaier ran for 74, but they've done a good job kind of mixing up the carries. McCray, the power back, with 13 carries. Lofty and Valentine both had 6 in this game against Rutgers, and this is a big win. This was kind of the one that maybe could go. The line was jumping back and forth between Illinois and Rutgers, and this was just a huge victory for the Illini. And it certainly looked like that this could be a 9-3 season, possibly a 10-win season with a bowl game. Could possibly be one of the best Illinois seasons in recent memory.
Which, again, to me is remarkable, Ted, because I talked about this in my post game. This team has now capable of surpassing the win total of the team 2 years ago.
Yep.
But that team 2 years ago had stars on it.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about Devin Witherspoon, who at this point is a top 5 cornerback in the NFL. You had Drazon Newton. You had Keith Randolph. You had bona fide stars who were like essentially contending for all Big Ten honors. This year's team has one that I can think of off the top of my head. That's Pat Bryant. The schedule. I just don't think there's anyone more important to their team than Pat. I made a tweet once that last drive started. Throw it up to Pat Bryant and pray. Basically, that's essentially what happened. And, he came down with it, but that's what Pat Bryant's been doing all season long. I referenced earlier, on your channel, when we previewed the Illinois season, we brought up Pat Bryant. And I said that I was kind of unsure. He was kind of a question mark to me. I knew he was a talented player, but I wasn't sure if he was ready to take on a number 1 or number 2 role for this offense. How silly was that? In my opinion, Locked On Illini, we're going to be the first official channel to basically promote Pat Bryant for all Big Ten first team. Every episode, we want to get the word out on social media, everything. This kid, his story, I got to meet him at Big Ten Media Days, the nicest, most mature young individual that you're going to find. He deserves everything that's going to be coming his way. And we're going to do our best here at Locked On Illini to make sure he gets as much publicity and notoriety as he can get.
Heck, I'll start pushing it too. We got Pat Bryant is second in the Big Ten right now in receiving yards. Ty Felton sitting there at 1,097. He's not going to catch Ty, but he's sitting there at 914 receiving yards. He's tied for the Big Ten lead with 9 receiving touchdowns this season. He leads the Big Ten in yards per reception at 18. We've seen a lot of those big chunk plays from Pat Bryant this season. So there's no question. I think that he certainly should be in that discussion of a first team all Big Ten nod. Certainly right now, you look at Tyler Warren is in that category, just 4 yards behind him. Jeremiah Smith is in that category. So at the worst, he'll probably finish 4th in the Big Ten in receiving. So, and you talked about how important he is, right? He's such that outlet for Luke Altmaier. Hey, you talked about chucking it up to him. When a play needs to be made, get it to 13 in orange and blue, and he certainly has made them this year.
Exactly right. Ted, what other games stood out to you this past weekend?
Of course, the one that everybody had their eye on this weekend was the Ohio State-Indiana matchup, and boy, it started pretty good for Indiana, didn't them? But I think Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator for Ohio State, kind of baited Indiana into a little bit of a false sense of security because when he saw that drive, he's like, all right, yeah, now we're going to ramp up the pressure because we have an extreme advantage. I talked about it in the preview of this game. I thought Ohio State had a big-time advantage on the defensive line versus Indiana's offensive line. The Hoosiers struggled to block. And you look at how Indiana played against the Michigan defensive line. Now we've seen it 2 times in a row for the Hoosiers. Okay. Is that a trend starting to develop? Because now you look at some of these college football playoff teams that Indiana could match up against, assuming that they can beat Purdue. And they says, hey, we got to attack this offensive line, get this offense out of rhythm. It is a rhythm-based offense for the Indiana Hoosiers. And that's exactly what you saw for the Ohio State Buckeyes. And now we'll talk about Ohio State's big game against Michigan coming up here, I'm sure, in just a little bit when we preview the next week. But Indiana got some help from the SEC. I think we'd be talking things maybe a little bit different. If some of these teams like the Texas A&Ms of the world, if the Ole Misses of the world, if the Alabamas of the world were able to win, but those are 3-loss teams, and you have an Indiana team that's likely going to be 11-1. They're going to get into the college football playoff. Now for Indiana, it's about fixing those issues by the time, the CFP certainly does roll around. How about Nebraska's offense getting off the ground? Were they all just a Dana Holgorsen away from being this good all year long? Maybe. It's possible. It's been one game, right? They got a test going to Iowa next week on Black Friday. But the thing about Nebraska, they went more north and south offensively than east and west. Marcus Satterfield was throwing a lot of screens, calling a lot of screen plays. And they just don't have the team speed to be able to execute that. You saw it earlier in the season where, hey, if Dylan's throwing the ball down the field, he can be very accurate. And I think with a young quarterback, you just need to continue to build up his confidence. And Dana Holgorsen has a great offensive track record, whether a head coach or a coordinator at Oklahoma State. This is clearly the momentum that Nebraska has wanted, and they have certainly a lot of offensive momentum right now. Penn State finding a way. Remember when Ian Malcolm in Jurassic Park says life finds a way. Penn State finds a way somehow in some of these close games. The Bowling Green, remember that earlier in the year? Remember USC, how they came away in overtime, and now this one against Minnesota, coming back from a halftime deficit against Wisconsin with a backup quarterback. They just find a way. And then Penn State, you get into a close game in the CFP. It's a 4-3, 7-point game, whatever it is. I might have a little bit of faith that they might be able to pull it out because they made big clutch plays in clutch situations. That's a heartbreaker, though, for Minnesota. They had a lot of opportunities to win that game, and now they got a rivalry game on the road against Wisconsin on Black Friday.
A lot of rivalry games. Let's go ahead and talk about those right after this. College basketball season is well underway, and let me tell you, there's no other experience like watching your favorite team at the home stadium. When you're looking for tickets, make sure you start off with the GameTime app. GameTime has a new feature called GameTime Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite team play live even easier. GameTime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. All-in pricing, toggling this feature shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Seat views get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. The lowest price guarantee or GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime Picks. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? Game time. All right, Ted. Like I said, one of my favorite, actually, this is probably my favorite weekend of the sports calendar, just because this is the part I enjoy about college sports, the rivalries. Throughout the win-loss records, it's all about passionate fan bases having one weekend to really go at it and hope that their team wins. I'm going to start off. Obviously, it's Locked On Illini. We're going to talk Illinois versus Northwestern. You would think that there might not be a lot at stake when it comes to Illinois, but perception-wise and what their postseason goals might be, a win here could be huge for them.
Absolutely. And we talked about it before, being able to get that 9-3 season. Look back at the history of Illinois football. Not a lot of 9-win years, right? It's going to set up this team as one of the best, certainly in recent memory. The 2001 team, the 2007 team were pretty good as well for Illinois. It's a rivalry game. It's Northwestern. They can be pesky, but when you look at the Wildcats, this is a team that's kind of flatlined, certainly this season. Last year, we talked about it offline before we came on the air here, is last year they were dealing with that us against the world and everything that happened with Pat Fitzgerald, and then that great story that happened, and that was fantastic. But then what was going to happen this year? It's very clear Northwestern has downgraded at the quarterback position. I think that's been a big factor, going from a guy who could sling it like Ben Bryant to somebody like Jack Lausch, bringing in a new offensive coordinator that has proven to have many climbs, so to speak, for Northwestern. It's been challenging, right, on the offensive side of the football. And then you look at defense, they lost some big-time leaders on this team, like the Bryce Gallagher, an all-time Northwestern linebacker coming into this season, certainly as well. There's a lot of advantages, I think, for Illinois in this game. Heck, you saw Michigan, an offense that has not done a whole lot this year, put up 50 on the Wildcats. I anticipate Illinois come out to play really well in this game and really finish this season strong, and can certainly come out with the victory to go to 9-3.
And it's a revenge game, too. Know, if you recall, last year, Illinois was sitting at 5 wins and needed that last game against the Northwestern Wildcats. It came down to a 2-point conversion where us who root for the orange and blue will say, I believe it was Isaiah Williams got interfered with on his catch in the end zone, but it was not called, and Northwestern ultimately won that game, and Illinois was not able to claim back-to-back bowl seasons. So you know that Brett Bielema and the staff is going to have the guys ready to play at Wrigley Field on Saturday, which is, by the way, a game I'm going to be trying to go to. So if you're an everydayer and you're going to be at the game, let me know, and maybe we can do a little pregame meetup. All right, Ted, this Black Friday, we get not 1, but 2 football games to watch. Let's hear about them.
Yeah, so the first one, you've got the Minnesota Golden Gophers traveling to Camp Randall Stadium to take on the Wisconsin Badgers. There's one team in this group of 4 that is not bowl eligible, and it's the Wisconsin Badgers. This is a team, I believe, the bowl streak, 22 consecutive years that they have been to a bowl game. Wisconsin has been a model of consistency over the last 2 decades plus, but and we've known the identity of Wisconsin football during that time, and they've lacked certainly an identity under Luke Fickell right now. And, the firing of the offensive coordinator and Braden Locke, right? The Locke family and Phil Longo were very tight knit together. Locke kind of feels like a little bit of a sitting duck quarterback. I think everybody knows that they're going to move on from him next season. So this is an interesting spot, and I think Minnesota is a good football team. Minnesota, remember, missed a last-second field goal against North Carolina to start the season. They lost by 3 to Michigan. They pushed Penn State to the brink, certainly this last week. This is a good football team, and this is going to be a tough test for the Wisconsin Badgers. Now, they were out Hunter Wohler at safety, Will Pauling at wide receiver. If they don't have those guys this week, I don't think they're going to win the football game. Now, if they need their defense to perform like it did in that game against the Oregon Ducks, right? The thing Wisconsin struggled with is pass rush. They need to get pressure on Max Brosmer. Brosmer is really good throwing the football. So I think Wisconsin in a little bit of a desperation mode to try to get to that bowl game and knock off the Minnesota Golden Gophers. How about Nebraska getting the offense together? We talked about that before. Iowa, all they do is run the ball, but they run it really, really well. Caleb Johnson just a couple of yards shy of 1,500 yards. He's the leading rusher in the Big Ten. He's the best running back in the country, not named Ashton Genty right now. So it comes down to Nebraska. Can they stop the run game of the Iowa Hawkeyes? Teams have been able to create some explosive plays over the top on Iowa. Can Dalen Raiola carry the momentum in the third game from last week? And can he carry it in to this game in prime time at Kinnick Stadium? I think both of these games are going to be very competitive rivalry games. There's certainly a lot of heat between all of these fan bases that participate on Black Friday games.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, you got to have extra leftovers for Friday just for that double header. But then Saturday, things don't ease up. Another batch of really good games.
There are 2 teams that sit in the top 2 spots in the rankings right now. And to me, they are the 2 national championship contenders in college football, and they are out for blood this weekend. They are out to exercise some demons. Oregon has lost 3 consecutive games to the Washington Huskies twice in 1 year last year. Oregon has lost these 3 games by 3 points each. Washington comes in. They're bowl eligible. They're sitting there at 6-5. Oregon, this game is at Autzen Stadium. There's been games this year where the Ducks have kind of coasted a little bit in the second half. If they're up, I think they're going to get up by a little bit more as this game certainly goes along. Oregon, has just a ton of matchup advantages. Washington, we'll see what they do at the quarterback position. Hey, Damon Williams can create some matchups with his mobility. We'll see if that gives Oregon some troubles. Tez Johnson, the great receiver, is going to be back for the Ducks in this game. Ohio State, we know the story. They have not beat Michigan since 2019. Remember, that 2020 game was canceled due to COVID. And then, of course, Michigan has won 3 consecutive games against the Buckeyes. It's been 5 years since the Scarlet and Gray have tasted victory over the Maize and Blue. Here's the deal when I look at this game. Look, I get it. Michigan put up 50 points last week, and this is a Michigan team that's gotten much better offensively as this year has gone along. But here's the deal. Bryce Underwood is not eligible to play football yet for the Wolverines. So I think they're going to have trouble moving the football on offense. You look at what Ohio State was able to do defensively. I think they're going to overwhelm Michigan in this game. I think the Buckeyes. And then, of course, you look at offense. We'll see how this offensive line, it looked pretty good last week against Indiana. Of course, we know Seth McLaughlin, the great center, is out for the season. How will they be able to match up against those 2 great interior defensive tackles for Michigan? Can Michigan wreak some havoc on defense? I think they're going to need to. They're going to need to be able to force turnovers. They're going to have to have plus plays in order to remain in this game for a little bit. But I think Oregon and Ohio State can certainly exercise some demons this weekend as well. And then you've got teams like a USC can knock their rival Notre Dame possibly out of the college football playoff. Maryland and Penn State, the Nittany Lions have owned that series, a win, and they clinch definitely a decently high seed to be able to have that home playoff game. They want to keep their momentum going. All Penn State does is beat Maryland in this series, going back to their days even before joining the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think I saw the record was 43-4 or something like that.
It's lopsided.
Incredible. It's kind of sad, Ted. This is the last full weekend of college football schedule. Again, we talked about this last week, but it felt like we were just previewing the season just a couple of weeks ago.
What a year it has been. This year has absolutely flown by, but here's the deal. We got the next weekend. We're going to have the Big Ten championship game, of course, in primetime on CBS. Going to take a week break. And then we got playoff games. We're looking at 4 Big Ten teams sitting there in the college football playoff. And I think based on these projected brackets, like they're looking like Penn State might slot into maybe that number 6 seed, right? Somewhere in there. And if you look at how the bracket shapes up, if they're able to take care of business in the first round against what would be the number 11 seed, you take on the 3 seed, which is likely to be that Miami or SMU ACC champion. Penn State might be favored in that game, right? There is a pretty decent path for 3 Big Ten teams to make it to the college football playoff semifinals. We'll see if it can happen. Yeah, that would be certainly quite the accomplishment. We had 2 current Big Ten teams playing in the national championship last season. If they can do that again, the gap continues to close and get a lot thinner between the Big Ten and the SEC, certainly. But it's all about winning these big games. Right now, you're in the playoff. Everybody talks about maybe some SEC bias or whatever. I'm not a huge. I mean, does it exist? Yeah, but I'm not going to shake my fist and pound at the wall kind of a thing about it, but they need to be able to win these games in the postseason to really start to chip away at that narrative. Penn State is kind of one of those teams where James Franklin hasn't been able to win the big game. Can he win a playoff game or 2? That'll certainly be write more of the legacy about James Franklin going forward. But I can't wait. I cannot wait for this playoff. I think it's going to be a great postseason. I can't wait for a potential New Year's Day Illinois bowl game certainly as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
It's a good time to be a Big Ten fan, and it's always a good time to be a fan of Big Ten. Ted, what do you have going on your channel?
A lot. It is rivalry weekend coming up. Let's see, coming up on Tuesday. I got to remember all this stuff. I put it out there in an image, so if people want to know, it's out there on Twitter and on YouTube. But I got rivalry previews: Oregon against Washington, Ohio State against Michigan, Nebraska against Iowa, Wisconsin against Minnesota, Notre Dame, USC. I've got my picks. I already put out some content earlier today on Monday. So there's all kinds of stuff this week as we finish things off here in the regular season. And then we look forward to Indianapolis next week.
All right, Ted, we'll see you next week.
All right. Sounds good.
And that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Locked On Illini. Remember, hit that notification button. I'm going to be going live immediately after the men's basketball game this evening. And again, if you'd like to support the channel, it doesn't cost you guys anything. Just hit that like button, subscribe button. My goal is to hit that magic 2,000 number before the end of the calendar year. Either way, I appreciate all of your support. And until next time, ILL love you guys.